I watched him vanish under the water, and he never came back up. Before we begin, if you enjoy these stories, subscribe to Dark Accounts and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. Today, I'm bringing you 4 disappearances that people witnessed in rivers. Cases where someone was dragged underwater and never seen again. The survivors tell what they saw. The bodies were never found. My name is Jake, and I'm 52 years old. In May 2019, I went on a fishing expedition with my business partner, Mike, who was 49. We ran a fishing tour company together on the Mississippi River for over 15 years. We knew that river better than anyone. We'd guided hundreds of tours, caught thousands of fish, navigated every section in all weather conditions. Mike never came back from that trip. I watched him get dragged underwater by something massive, and there was nothing I could do to save him. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It was late afternoon, around 5 p.m. We'd been fishing all day and had decided to check our catfish lines one last time before heading back. Mike swam to the riverbank, about 20 yards from our boat, to check a trot line we'd set earlier. The water was relatively calm, no strong current in that area. Mike was an excellent swimmer, had grown up on the river. I watched him pull up the line, remove a couple of big catfish. "We got some monsters," he yelled to me, grinning. He seemed happy. It had been a good day. He started swimming back toward the boat. He was halfway, maybe 10 yards from me when it happened. Something pulled him under. It wasn't gradual, it was instant and violent. One moment, Mike was swimming normally. The next, he was yanked underwater like someone had tied a rope to his legs and pulled hard. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. Your best friend and business partner is swimming toward you. You're talking to him, watching him smile, and suddenly he vanishes under the water, pulled with such force he doesn't even have time to scream. The water closes over him, and he doesn't come back up. "Mike!" I shouted. I started the motor and raced to where he disappeared. I got there in seconds. The water was murky. I couldn't see anything below the surface. "Mike! Mike!" I kept yelling. I reached into the water, searching blindly. Nothing. I thought about jumping in to look for him, but something stopped me, a primal fear. If something had taken him, that thing would take me too. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The water was completely calm now, like nothing had happened. No bubbles, no movement, nothing. "He has to come up for air," I kept telling myself, my voice breaking. "He has to come up." But Mike never came up. After 5 minutes, I started searching desperately, driving the boat in circles, scanning the water. Nothing. After half an hour, I went for help. Search and rescue teams came. Divers searched the river in that area for 4 days. They dragged the river in sections. They never found Mike's body. They never found anything at all. You would feel the crushing guilt. Your partner disappeared in front of your eyes, and you couldn't do anything. His family asks what happened, and you have no answers, because what you saw makes no sense. People don't just vanish underwater in 1 second. But they do. Mike vanished, and I know what took him. Because just before he was pulled under, I saw something in the water. A huge, dark shadow moving fast below the surface. It was massive, as thick as an oil drum, so long I couldn't see where it ended. I told the authorities this. They didn't believe me. "Probably an alligator," they said, "or he got tangled in something underwater and drowned." But I know it wasn't an alligator. Alligators don't drag someone that fast, that deep. And the shape I saw was different. It was a snake, an anaconda or python, but massive, way bigger than any documented specimen. I talked to old-timers who'd lived on the Mississippi their whole lives. They weren't surprised. "Rivers got secrets," they said. "Things living deep down that ain't supposed to be there." Been stories for 100 years of giant snakes in the deep parts. They take someone every few years. Bodies never turn up. I sold the tour business. Couldn't go back on that river without seeing Mike's face disappearing under the water, without wondering if I could have done something different. Mike's wife had to hold a funeral without a body. She asked me 1,000 times what exactly happened. I told her it was an accident, that he drowned. I didn't tell her about the shadow I saw. about the massive shape that dragged her husband into the depths. Some horrors are better left unshared. 3 years later, in 2022, another fisherman disappeared in the same area of the river, exactly the same way. He was swimming, got pulled under in 1 second, and never came back up. Body never found. The authorities closed that section of the river to swimming and put up warning signs. Dangerous waters, no swimming. But they don't say why it's dangerous, because if they told the truth, that there's something massive living there that takes people, nobody would believe them. Leave a like if you're enjoying this, and tell me in the comments, do you know of any unexplained disappearances in rivers? I'd love to read your story.
But massive snakes aren't the only dangerous thing in American rivers. Sometimes something drags you into the water and you never know exactly what it was. Let me tell you what happened to a group of college students on the Snake River in Idaho in August 2020. One of them, a girl named Ashley, never made it home. Brad is the student who was there that day. He's 24 years old now and says what he saw will haunt him for the rest of his life. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It was a recreational rafting trip. Brad and 5 other college students from Boise State University had rented rafts to float down a calm section of the Snake River. Among them was Ashley, a 21-year-old biology major who loved the outdoors and had come specifically to see the river ecosystem. Around 3 in the afternoon, they stopped at a wide area where the river is calm and slow-moving. This is a safe spot to swim, their rental company had told them. The water's deep, but the current is gentle. 4 of the students, including Ashley, decided to swim. They wore life jackets as a precaution. Brad stayed in the raft with the other student, watching. Ashley was a strong swimmer. She paddled out a bit from the group, maybe 30 yards from the raft, floating on her back, enjoying the sun. "Ashley, don't go too far," Brad called out. She waved to show she'd heard and started swimming back toward the raft. That's when something pulled her under. One moment she was on the surface, the next she'd completely disappeared. The life jacket should have kept her afloat, but she was yanked down with such force the jacket didn't matter. Imagine you're in that raft. A friend is under your watch and just vanished underwater. The other students are screaming. You have to do something, but you don't know what, because what you just saw defies all logic. Brad grabbed the oars and paddled frantically toward where Ashley had disappeared. The other 3 swimmers were already swimming back to the raft, terrified. "Where is she? Where's Ashley?" the students in the raft were shouting. The water where she'd been showed ripples like something large had moved just beneath the surface, but Ashley didn't come up. Brad got ready to jump in the water, but one of the other students, Ashley's roommate, stopped him. "Look," she said, pointing at the water with shaking hands. There was blood. Not much, but definitely blood, staining the water a dark red in a small area, and something else. Bubbles, large bubbles rising from the deep. "Ashley! Ashley!" they were screaming, hysterical. They waited, searched. Brad called 911 on his cell phone. Rescue boats arrived, search teams, divers. The divers went down. They said the river there was almost 30 feet deep. At the bottom, they found Ashley's life jacket. It was torn, like something had ripped it off her body. There were marks on the jacket, punctures that looked like teeth. But they didn't find Ashley. They searched for 6 days, dragged the river. Nothing, like the water had swallowed her completely. The authorities said it was probably a bull shark. They explained bull sharks can survive in fresh water. They've been documented in the Mississippi River system. One could have made it up to the Snake River. It probably dragged her to a deep hole. But Brad wasn't convinced. He'd seen something just before Ashley was pulled under. A shape in the water, large and dark, moving fast. It wasn't the shape of a shark. It was different. Longer, more serpentine. Local fishermen told him afterward that section of the river had a reputation. "Something big lives in the deep holes," they told him. "Been stories for decades. It takes someone every few years." Ashley's parents came from California and stayed in Idaho for a month, waiting for them to find her body. It never happened. Eventually, they had to go home. No body, no answers, no closure.
just the memory of their daughter vanishing underwater in an instant. Brad dropped out of college after that. He couldn't focus on classes, couldn't sleep without seeing Ashley disappear. He's working now at a hardware store in Boise, trying to move on, but he told me he'll never go near a river again.
And speaking of river disappearances, I need to share what happened to a group of 3 kayakers on the Colorado River in June 2021. They set out together. Only one came back alive. And what the survivor tells is absolutely terrifying. Sarah is the survivor. She's 35 years old now. She says what she saw that day changed her life forever. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. The 3 kayakers, Sarah, Tom, and Lisa, were experienced adventurers. They decided to kayak a remote section of the Colorado River, something they'd planned for months. They were navigating through a canyon area, beautiful red rocks rising on both sides, the river flowing steady but not too fast. It was an experienced kayaker's dream. Around noon, they reached a section where the river widened and slowed. They decided to take a break. "Let's swim here," Tom suggested. "Cool off before the next rapids." Tom and Lisa got in the water while Sarah stayed in her kayak to guard their gear. The water looked calm, clear, maybe 10 feet deep there. Tom was swimming near the kayaks when he suddenly sank. No scream, no struggle. He just sank, like something had grabbed him from below. "Tom!" Lisa screamed, swimming toward where he'd disappeared. But when she got there, she was pulled down too, in 1 second, without warning. You would feel paralyzing terror. 2 of your friends just vanished underwater, one after another. You're in your kayak, staring at the water where they were seconds ago, and there's nothing, just calm water. Sarah looked at the water, horrified. "What's happening? Where are they?" she was shouting to herself. She grabbed her paddle and started hitting the water, trying to scare whatever was down there. "Come up! Come up!" she screamed. But Tom and Lisa didn't come up. The water had turned murky now, stirred up by something moving beneath the surface. And then Sarah saw blood, a lot of blood, turning the water red. "Paddle! Get away!" Her survival instincts kicked in. She paddled desperately, moving away from that area as fast as she could. When she was about 50 yards away, she looked back. She saw something briefly emerge from the water. It was huge, dark, with scales that gleamed wet in the sunlight. It had something in its mouth. She couldn't make out exactly what, but it was the size of a human body. Then it sank back down, taking whatever it had with it. She called 911 when she reached the next access point. Search and rescue teams arrived. They searched for a week. They didn't find the bodies of Tom or Lisa. The only thing they found was Tom's waterproof camera, with teeth marks puncturing the case. The authorities said it was probably a freak accident with underwater currents. They could have been sucked into an underwater cave system, they suggested. That's why we can't find the bodies. But Sarah knows what she saw. It was something massive, something that moved with impossible speed. It wasn't currents, she told me. It was something alive, something that hunts in those waters and knows how to take humans. She showed me footage from Tom's camera they'd recovered. The last video, recorded just before the attack, shows the water. And in one frame, barely visible, there's a huge shadow moving beneath them. It's too dark and blurry to identify, but it's definitely something enormous and reptilian. Locals confirmed that section of the Colorado had history. Native tribes have stories about it, one old rancher told her. They call it the river serpent, say it's been there since before white men came. Takes someone every generation to remind people to respect the river. Now there are warning signs posted. Extreme danger, no swimming. But they don't say what the danger is, because the truth would terrify people too much. Sarah sold all her kayaking gear. She can't even look at photos of rivers without having panic attacks, because she knows that under that beautiful, calm water, there are predators that can kill you before you have time to scream. To close out these disturbing accounts, I want to share what happened to two professional divers in September 2022. They descended together into the depths of the Hudson River in New York. Only one came back to the surface, and what he tells about what he saw down there is absolutely horrifying. Chris is the survivor. He's 41 years old and was a recovery diver with 18 years of experience. His partner, Marcus, was 45 and had been diving even longer. The two had been friends for years and had done hundreds of dives together. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. They'd been hired by the NYPD to search for evidence in a cold case. A weapon had supposedly been thrown into the Hudson near the George Washington Bridge. Their job was to go down, search the river bottom, see if they could find anything. The dive started normally. They descended slowly, checking their equipment, communicating by underwater radio. At 20 feet, everything was fine. At 30 feet, they started seeing the river bottom. The riverbed was covered with debris, old tires, shopping carts, trash, and bones. Lots of animal bones scattered across the bottom. "You seeing this?" Marcus asked over the radio. "Skeletons everywhere." "Yeah," Chris responded. "Must be a feeding ground for something big." They continued exploring. At about 40 feet deep, they came to a section where the riverbed dropped off steeply, descending into darker, deeper water. And in that drop-off, Chris saw openings, entrances to underwater caves or tunnels, large and dark. Marcus approached one of the caves to investigate. Chris was about 15 feet away, searching through debris. That's when he heard the scream over the radio. Not a scream of pain, but of absolute terror. "Chris, something's got me!" Chris spun around. He saw Marcus being dragged toward the cave. Something had grabbed his leg, something large that was inside the tunnel and was pulling him in. Imagine you're 40 feet underwater. Your best friend is being dragged into a dark cave by something you can't fully see. You know if you go in after him, you'll probably die too, but he's your friend. What do you do? Chris swam there as fast as he could. He grabbed Marcus's arm, trying to pull him out, but whatever had Marcus was incredibly strong. It was like fighting against a mechanical winch. For a moment, Chris saw what had his friend. Through the murky water and the darkness of the cave, he saw something massive. Dark scales, a body as thick as a barrel, and teeth, huge teeth buried in Marcus's leg. The creature pulled harder. Chris felt Marcus slipping from his hands. "Don't let go!" Marcus was screaming, his voice full of panic. "I'm not!" Chris responded, pulling with all his strength, but it was useless. Whatever had Marcus was too strong. There was one last violent pull. Marcus screamed and was dragged completely into the cave. Chris saw bubbles coming from the cave, saw the water turn red with blood, and then silence. "Marcus! Marcus!" Chris was shouting over the radio. No response. Chris knew he had to ascend, that staying down there was suicide. With tears inside his mask, he began to rise, making the necessary depression stops even though every second was agony. When he reached the surface, he immediately called for help. Rescue teams arrived. Divers went down. They found Marcus's equipment near the cave, his camera, his light, but they didn't find Marcus. One diver reported seeing something large moving inside the cave, but refused to go in to investigate. He said, "There's something down there, something I don't want to find." They searched for 5 days, closed that section of the river, but Marcus's body was never recovered. Chris showed me the video from his camera. In the final footage, just before Marcus was dragged in, you can briefly see what grabbed him. It's hard to make out clearly, but it's definitely something huge, reptilian, with a mouth full of teeth. Experts who reviewed the video couldn't identify the species. They said, possibly a large constrictor snake, or maybe an alligator that made its way up from the south, or something we haven't classified yet. The Hudson connects to the ocean. It's tidal from miles inland. Who knows what could have swum up from the Atlantic and made a home in the deep sections? Marcus's family had to hold a funeral without a body. Chris attended, torn apart by guilt. He told me I should have done more. I should have pulled harder. I should have saved my friend. But he knows there was nothing he could have done. What grabbed Marcus was too big, too strong, and it lived in those caves at the bottom of the Hudson, waiting. Chris quit diving after that. Now he works at a desk job in Manhattan trying to forget. But he told me he'll never go near the Hudson River again because he knows what's down there in the dark water, and it's still hunting. If you made it this far, leave a comment telling me if you know of any mysterious river disappearances. And if you know someone who enjoys these tales, share the video. See you in the next one.